What if a quiet man, just trying to eat breakfast, ended up triggering a national reckoning? He didn't shout. He didn't fight. All he did was make one phone call, and suddenly the whole country wanted to know, who is Leonard Briggs, a 71-year-old Marine veteran, forgotten by the system, humiliated in public, until the truth about his past forced the world to stop and listen. This isn't just a story about injustice. It's a story about dignity, silence, and the battles we fight long after the war ends. If you believe in respect, in honoring those who gave everything and asked for nothing, this is a story you need to hear. Don't forget to like, leave a comment below, and subscribe to my channel for more powerful, true-to-life stories. And tap the notification bell so you never miss the next moment that just might restore your faith in humanity. Pinefield, Alabama, Thursday, 7:45 a.m. The fog rolled in like it had somewhere to be, thick and low, swallowing the tops of street signs and muffling the sound of tires on wet pavement. In Pinefield, mornings like this weren't rare, but they always felt a little haunted. The kind of quiet that made you lower your voice without knowing why. A quiet town, a watchful one. Folks here didn't like surprises. They liked things the way they were. Slow, steady, familiar. At the corner of two tired streets, one cracked with old asphalt, the other lined with mailboxes that had long since leaned to one side, stood a squat little diner called Maple Junction. No neon sign, no online reviews, just a hand-painted board out front and a bell on the door that clanged like an old church bell in a storm. Inside, the air smelled like fried eggs, burnt toast, and something faintly metallic, like a coffee pot that had been used since Nixon was in office. The booths were cracked vinyl, red once, now dulled to rust. The window glass fogged with condensation, and the overhead fan clicked with each slow spin. In the back, at the far left booth, the one near the window but away from the door, sat Leonard Lenny Briggs, 71, thin but strong in the way old wood is strong, a man who didn't ask for much and wouldn't take it if offered. His jacket, Marine Corps issue, faded olive drab, hung off his frame like memory. The collar was frayed. The sleeves were 2 inches too short now. He wore it anyway. Some men carry medals. Lenny carried the uniform. In front of him, resting neatly on the table, was a small black notebook, worn soft around the edges. He flipped it open with one calloused hand, the fingers still marked with scars that looked like they had stories they'd never tell. He didn't write anything, not yet. He just stared at the page like he was waiting for something to settle inside him. He came here every Thursday, same time, same seat, same order, black coffee, 2 scrambled eggs, and dry toast. No butter, no questions. The waitress, a woman named Ray, who always smelled faintly of lavender and cigarettes, knew his routine by heart. Most folks in town didn't know where he lived. Some guessed he stayed at the veterans shelter by the train tracks. Others figured he slept in his truck, though no one had ever seen him drive. A few thought he didn't sleep at all. But what everyone did know, whether they admitted it or not, was that Lenny Briggs wasn't just some old vet trying to stretch out a hot meal. There was a quiet authority in how he sat, how he watched the room, how he never flinched when someone raised their voice. Some said he used to run covert ops. Others whispered about a mission in Kandahar that never made the news. Lenny never confirmed a word of it. He just came in, nodded politely, and took his corner, like clockwork. But today, something was off. The fog was too thick, the silence too sharp. And as Lenny sipped his coffee and turned the page in his notebook, he didn't look up when the door opened. But he knew. Something was coming. It started with a voice. Young, nasal, and too loud for the quiet rhythm of Maple Junction. "Yo, why is this homeless guy taking up space? Ain't there a shelter for that?" The words echoed off the tile and glass, sharp and sudden. Lenny didn't look up. He didn't have to. The tone was all too familiar. Not cruel so much as careless. The kind of voice that hadn't lived long enough to carry weight. The kind that assumed no one was listening who mattered. The voice belonged to a kid, maybe early 20s, hoodie half zipped, earbuds in, live streaming on TikTok with one hand while swirling a plastic straw in a glass of orange soda with the other. His phone angled toward Lenny's booth. Across the counter, Ray froze mid-pour. Her eyes met Harold's, the owner, grill man, and unofficial keeper of peace. He set his spatula down a little harder than usual, but said nothing. Lenny turned one page in his notebook, slowly, deliberately. He didn't speak. He never did when poked. That was something he'd learned long ago, in places where silence could save lives. But it wasn't long before the real trouble arrived. 3 officers stepped into the diner, boots heavy on the tile. No sirens, no radio chatter, just presence, and the kind that didn't feel neighborly. Lieutenant Wade Carver led the pack, broad-shouldered, mid-40s, with a jaw too tight for polite company. His eyes scanned the room like he owned it. Behind him, Officer Juno, barely older than the kid with the phone, tried to look important and came off as unsure. Bringing up the rear was Sergeant Miles, older, more measured, eyes that lingered just a moment longer on Lenny than the others. Carver didn't pause. He walked straight toward the back booth. "Sir," he said, the word hollow with impatience. "We've had a complaint." Lenny blinked once. His fork hovered over his eggs. Then he set it down neatly beside his plate. "What kind of complaint?" Carver's lip curled. "You've made customers uncomfortable." Ray stepped out from behind the counter. "He's a regular, Wade. Been coming here longer than you've been in uniform." "I wasn't talking to you," Carver snapped. Harold's voice came from the kitchen. Calm, steel under the surface. "She wasn't asking permission." Carver ignored them. He turned back to Lenny. "I'm going to ask you to leave, sir." Lenny looked up now, full and steady. His voice was quiet. "I haven't broken any laws. I paid for my meal. I'm eating it." Officer Juno shifted uncomfortably. Miles said nothing. Carver stepped closer, his shadow now stretching across the table. "I'm not going to argue. You need to vacate the premises." "I'm not done," Lenny said plainly, lifting his coffee for a slow sip. His hands didn't shake. The young man with the phone whispered, "Yo, this is wild," and kept recording. Carver's nostrils flared. "Sir, if you do not comply, I will call for backup and charge you with obstruction and trespassing." Lenny raised one eyebrow. "Obstructing what?" "Business," Carver barked. "Your presence is disruptive." Miles finally spoke, his voice low, almost reluctant. "Wade, maybe we cool it." Carver cut him off. "Number, we do this by the book? I said vacate. Now." Ray stepped forward again, eyes flashing. "He's not bothering anyone. You know he's a veteran. You know he's not a threat." Carver turned sharply. "Are you refusing to comply with a lawful directive?" "I'm refusing to let you push a man out of here like he's trash," she snapped. There it was, the line, and now it had been crossed. Carver reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Lieutenant Carver. Send backup to Maple Junction Diner. Potential 1092 in progress." Miles looked down. Juno's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Lenny didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. But as he reached slowly into his jacket pocket, the whole diner seemed to hold its breath. What he pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was an old flip phone. And without saying a word, he opened it and dialed. The flip phone clicked open with the kind of sound that didn't belong in the year 2025. No touchscreen, no voice assistant, just cold plastic and memory. Lenny didn't look up, didn't raise his voice. He pressed one button, the top left, then brought the phone slowly to his ear. The diner went still. The cook in the back, halfway through flipping a hash brown, stopped mid-motion. Ray's hand hovered inches above the coffee pot, her eyes locked on Lenny's unmoving figure. Even the kid live streaming lowered his phone a few degrees, sensing, for the first time, that this wasn't content. This was something else. And then Lenny spoke. Just 3 words. "Tell Phoenix 0. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full, bursting with invisible pressure, like the moment before a storm rips the sky in half. Sergeant Miles blinked, slowly, his head turned toward Carver, but someone else spoke first. A man at the window, old, maybe late 60s, in a John Deere cap, eating grits by himself. "Wait," he said, barely above a whisper. "Phoenix Zero? That's not a person. That's a protocol." Carver scoffed, but it didn't land. No one was laughing. Lenny didn't say another word. He closed the phone with the same care one might use to fold a flag, then placed it on the edge of the table. His fork was still beside his eggs, untouched, coffee half full. No bravado, no threats, just stillness. Carver's hand dropped away from his radio. His mouth opened, searching for some version of control, but none came. Even Officer Juno, who moments ago had puffed up like he mattered, now looked pale and very, very young. Outside, the morning fog thickened, wrapping the diner in cotton silence. And then, 6 minutes later, it happened. The roar of tires broke the stillness like glass. Heads turned toward the windows, just in time to see a matte black SUV slam to a stop in front of the diner. It had no license plate. The windows were pitch dark. Government issue. Heavy. Serious. The passenger door opened, then the driver's side. 3 people stepped out, all in black suits. Not local law. No patches, no name tags, no time for pleasantries. They moved like they were trained to. Ray backed up instinctively. The kid with the phone stopped recording. The first agent through the door was a woman, maybe in her late 40s, short silver hair, sharp eyes that scanned the room like a security camera. She didn't need to ask for a scene report. She already had it. Behind her came 2 men, one older, lean, with the stillness of a man who'd waited years to be called again. The other was younger but clearly high level. Earpiece in, tablet under his arm, eyes never leaving Lenny's table. They didn't speak to anyone at first, just took in the room, clocked the officers, clocked the faces. Then the woman spoke. "Local enforcement," she said firmly, voice low but ironclad. "Step away from the subject." Carver blinked. "Excuse me? You heard me. This is our jurisdiction." "Not anymore." Miles cleared his throat. "Wade!" But Carver stepped forward, indignant. "Who the hell do you think you are?" The second agent lifted a small black wallet. He didn't open it. Didn't need to. "Federal authority. Authorization linked to Phoenix Zero designation. You're now in violation of classified command protocol by remaining on site. Last chance, Lieutenant." And just like that, Carver froze. His bravado evaporated. He glanced toward Miles, but the sergeant had already stepped back. Slowly. Silently. Juno looked like he might be sick. Harold stepped out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "We got a problem here?" The silver-haired woman gave him a nod. Respectful. Quick. "No, sir. We're resolving one." Ray, still clutching the coffee pot like a weapon, finally exhaled. The lead agent turned her gaze to Lenny, and something passed between them. Not words, not gestures, but history. Recognition. Reverence. "Mr. Briggs," she said quietly, "we received your signal." Lenny gave the faintest nod, not of approval, not of thanks, just of understanding. The agent leaned slightly toward the table. "Are you safe?" "I am now." And with that, the federal team turned to the Pinefield officers. "You have 60 seconds to clear this property," the younger agent said, tapping his watch. "Or you'll be making statements to the Inspector General under oath by noon." Miles didn't hesitate. He left first. Juno followed. Carver stayed a heartbeat longer. Chest tight, eyes wild, as if trying to find a way to make this make sense. But there wasn't one. He turned without a word and walked out into the fog. Behind him, the door clanged shut. Inside, no one spoke. Outside, the SUV idled like a warning. And in the corner booth, Lenny Briggs picked up his fork and took his first bite of eggs. The fog outside had begun to lift, but inside Maple Junction, the air only grew heavier. The federal agents didn't raise their voices. They didn't have to. Every move was controlled, deliberate, the kind of precision you only learn from long years in high-stakes silence. The woman with the silver hair, who had spoken to Lenny moments ago, now turned her attention to the rest of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said calmly, but with unmistakable command, "this location is now under federal lockdown. Section 7, Emergency response protocol. No one enters, no one exits. She nodded to her colleague, the younger man with the tablet, who pulled a small black folder from his coat pocket and unfolded it on the nearest table. Inside was a printed document, stamped with multiple red seals and an embedded chip. By order of the Department of Defense and Homeland Operations, he said, we are authorizing immediate seizure of all digital recording equipment within this premises. He looked at the waitress, Ray. That includes the security camera feeds, on-site and cloud-based. Ray hesitated. They back up automatically to Harold's office computer. The older agent, quiet until now, stepped forward. We'll need access immediately. Harold didn't argue. He motioned toward the swinging kitchen door. Second door on the right. Passwords Maple 1963. Without pause, the agent disappeared behind the counter. Then the agent with the tablet turned toward the other patrons. If anyone in this room has recorded video or audio of the incident, we ask that you voluntarily surrender the device. Your content will be copied, preserved as evidence, and returned. There was a pause, a long one. Then the unthinkable happened. Lieutenant Wade Carver stepped forward. You have no jurisdiction here, he barked. This isn't a war zone, and this sure as hell isn't some top-secret operation. The young agent glanced toward him, measured, unmoved. Lieutenant, you are currently under observation for obstruction of a federal directive. Carver's jaw flexed. Observation my ass. And then he reached, fast and angry, for the phone clipped to his belt. Big mistake. In a single motion, the silver-haired agent moved. It was surgical. She stepped forward, grabbed Carver's wrist, twisted, and spun him with mechanical efficiency. Before he could finish the word unhand, his right arm was locked behind his back, and her knee was pressed just behind his. He was down, not slammed, but controlled, face down on the floor, the breath punched from his lungs. In the same moment, the younger agent pulled a zip cuff from his coat and secured Carver's wrist like it was second nature. Gasps echoed through the diner. Nobody moved. Even Harold, now standing with both hands gripping the counter, didn't speak. Finally, Carver growled into the tile. You're gonna regret this. The older agent returned from the office and didn't blink. We already have. That's why we're here. Ray swallowed hard. What? What is this really about? The silver-haired agent stood up, brushing a speck of dust off her jacket. Ask him, she said, nodding toward Lenny. But Lenny didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because just then, as if fate had timed it, the kid in the hoodie, the same one who had mocked Lenny earlier, raised his phone slowly. It's already out there, he said, voice smaller now. I live-streamed the whole thing and posted it to TikTok. The silver-haired agent blinked once. Who's they? She asked. Everyone, he replied. Over 40,000 people have seen it already, and someone else clipped it. It's being reshared. The room fell silent again. Then the kid, nervous now, held up his phone. You want it back? No, said the younger agent after a beat. We want the link. The kid nodded quickly, fumbling to send the video. Ray glanced at Lenny, whose expression hadn't changed. Still calm, still quiet. And yet, beneath the quiet, something was shifting. Something old, something heavy. The kind of thing you bury deep and hope the world never finds again. But now? Now the world was watching, and the name Leonard Briggs, a name once buried beneath government files and forgotten orders, was already being typed into search bars by the thousands. The mystery wasn't hidden anymore. It had just been uploaded. The world didn't just watch, it reacted. Within 2 hours, the video of Lenny Briggs's quiet defiance, the flip phone, the code phrase, the takedown of a police lieutenant by federal agents, had exploded across the internet. What began as a shaky live stream from a diner booth in Pinefield, Alabama, now had a hashtag burning its way through social media feeds from Boston to Bakersfield. Who is Lenny Briggs hit the top 3 trending topics on Twitter before lunch. Cable networks scrambled. Within minutes, the footage aired on local Alabama news stations, then migrated to national morning shows, each anchor offering stunned commentary over the now viral clip. The contrast between Lenny's quiet calm and the chaos around him gripped viewers. Millions watched as a federal team stormed a sleepy diner, removed local police, and treated an elderly veteran like a national asset. The mystery became the story. Who was this man? Why had his phone call triggered federal action? And why did the words Phoenix Zero make seasoned officers hesitate? By midday, online sleuths, journalists, and military insiders began digging. Public military records offered little, too little. Just a name, a date of birth, a single commendation entry, and then nothing. A blank stretch covering more than 2 decades. Redacted, restricted, sealed. That's when the Washington Chronicle dropped the first real clue. An investigative reporter cross-referenced military evacuation operations in the Middle East from 2000 to 2010 with blacked-out mission summaries, and found something buried deep in a footnote of a long-forgotten Pentagon report. It was just a phrase. Operation Willow Glass. Commander L. Briggs. Mission outcome. Successful extraction. All hostages recovered. No other details. No press release. No ceremony. But someone knew what that meant. By 2:15 p.m., a retired Marine colonel, speaking anonymously to protect clearance agreements, appeared on MSNBC. His voice was gravel, his words cautious. Lenny Briggs led one of the most elite hostage recovery units we had, Task Force Condor. These were Tier 1 operators, people who didn't officially exist. If he said Phoenix Zero, someone up top listened. Another story broke just minutes later. In 2004, a U.S. senator's daughter was kidnapped by insurgents outside Kirkuk. The rescue team wasn't identified. The details were sealed. But a classified commendation surfaced, partially redacted, and on the final page, under a black marker, the name Leonard E. Briggs was visible beneath the ink when exposed to infrared. The media storm erupted. CNN ran back-to-back coverage titled The Silent Hero of Pinefield. Veterans groups called for formal recognition. Military historians weighed in. Talk radio lit up. And everywhere from Facebook to Fox News, people were asking the same thing. How did we not know this man's name before today? The answer was as haunting as it was simple. They weren't supposed to. Lenny's entire career had been buried under layers of national security, not to hide failure, but to protect success. His unit worked in silence, disappeared when the job was done. No medals, no headlines, no interviews, just clean exits, folded flags, and coded mission reports. Until now, because now everything was unraveling. In Pinefield, the diner sat at the epicenter of a nationwide revelation. Journalists lined the sidewalk. Camera crews staked out the parking lot. Protesters with signs, "Respect our veterans, I am Lenny Briggs," stood beside boom mic operators and folding chairs. Some came out of gratitude, others out of guilt, all of them out of awe. Inside, Lenny sat at the same booth, black notebook open, eyes on the coffee cup cooling in front of him. He said little, just nodded now and then, scribbled occasionally. Ray had stopped asking questions. She just refilled his cup every so often, watching the ripple when it touched the brim. "I thought I was done with all this," he said once, voice low. Harold, standing near the counter, replied without looking up. "That's the thing about unfinished business, Lenny. It doesn't ask for permission." Lenny didn't argue, because deep down, he knew the truth. They had erased him for the country's sake. But now the country was remembering, and this time, it wouldn't be quiet. By Friday morning, Pinefield wasn't just on the map, it was under a microscope. Satellite trucks lined Main Street. Reporters paced outside the diner with notepads and microphones, hoping for a glimpse of the man who had shaken the country's conscience without raising his voice. But Leonard Briggs wasn't giving interviews. Not to CNN, not to the New York Times, not even to the veteran-owned podcast that offered him a lifetime supply of coffee in exchange for 30 minutes of his time. Every time someone asked for a quote, a comment, a sit-down, Lenny gave the same answer. "I'm not here for applause. I just wanted a warm meal." He meant it. He didn't want a spotlight. He wanted silence. Peace. 2 eggs and dry toast, maybe with a side of quiet. But the storm he had never asked for kept growing. The chief of police in Pinefield, a man named Hal Denton, who had worn the badge for 28 years, was forced to resign less than 72 hours after the video went viral. His press conference was stiff and shallow, an apology written by lawyers and delivered by a man who clearly didn't think he owed anyone anything. The public didn't buy it. Neither did Washington. The FBI launched an internal review into the Pinefield Police Department within days. What began as a routine investigation quickly unraveled a pattern of misconduct. Buried complaints, excessive force, discriminatory stops, and beneath all of it, a disturbing number of incidents involving homeless citizens and veterans. Lenny's quiet resistance had become a lit match in a dry forest, and now the fire was burning through red tape. Across the country, people shared their own stories of profiling, humiliation, silence. Veterans wrote letters. Strangers mailed checks to the shelter Lenny was rumored to be staying in. Local school kids left notes taped to the diner's window. "Thank you, Mr. Briggs." One drew a picture of him in a cape. The irony wasn't lost on him. They saw him as a hero now. But where were they last week? Last year? When he stood in the grocery store line with $2 and a can of soup and felt the stares behind him? Where were they when he applied for a job and was told, "You don't quite fit our image"? He didn't hate them for it. He just didn't need their approval now. At the diner, Harold refused to charge him for meals. Ray tried to slip him pie when no one was looking. Lenny never took more than he needed. He always left cash, tucked neatly under the edge of the napkin. "I served my country," he told a young reporter who wouldn't stop pushing. "But that doesn't make me special. Plenty of us did. Some of us just never got back." The reporter asked what he wanted now that the country finally knew his name. Lenny looked out the window where a group of protesters held signs not of anger, but of presence. Quiet, still, constant. "I want folks to remember this happened," he said, "because if they forget again, then all this..." He gestured toward the cameras, the lights, the noise. "It's just another headline waiting to disappear." And with that, he stood up, placed a $5 bill on the table, and walked out. No fanfare, no handshake line, just an old Marine walking steady into a world that had finally decided to look him in the eye, even if it was years too late. 1 week later, the fog had lifted, but the weight of what happened hadn't. Maple Junction was different now. The booths were still cracked. The coffee still burned your tongue if you weren't careful. Earl still forgot to salt the grits, but something had shifted in the air. A hush, a reverence, like the town had started listening more than it spoke. By 8 a.m., the place was full. Locals, outsiders, reporters who came without cameras this time. A young couple from Georgia who drove 3 hours just to see the booth. A pastor from Montgomery who quietly handed Ray a sealed letter and whispered, "Give this to him, please." And at the center of it all, seated in the same worn booth near the window, was Leonard Briggs. He wore the same faded Marine jacket, carried the same notebook. But he looked different. Not younger, not lighter, just more seen, like a man whose shadow had finally caught up with his name. He hadn't said much in the past 7 days, just the occasional nod, a soft thank you, or a polite, "Please, no pictures." But this morning felt different. Even before he stood, the diner felt like it was holding its breath. Lenny cleared his throat. Just once. It was enough to silence the room. He stood slowly, placing both hands flat on the edge of the table. His gaze swept across the packed diner. Not judging, not angry, just searching. And then he spoke. "I bled for this country." The words landed hard, not loud, but heavy, unapologetic. "I lost brothers in places you can't pronounce, men who never came back, and I came home thinking I'd find purpose. Maybe peace." He paused. No one moved. "Instead, I slept in my truck. I got called a nuisance, told to move along like I was litter blowing down a sidewalk. I came back to be treated like trash." A murmur, barely audible, rippled in the silence. "That's not justice. That's America forgetting its own." Lenny looked down for a moment, fingers tracing the grain of the wooden table. His voice, when it returned, was softer, but not weaker. I didn't ask for this moment. I never wanted a stage. I just wanted 2 eggs, a cup of coffee, and a little quiet. But if you're all listening now, really listening, then hear this. He straightened. Don't wait until a man goes viral to value his life. Don't wait until he's humiliated on camera to ask what he's been through. Don't wait until his story becomes your trending topic to admit he mattered all along. Silence. A few people bowed their heads. One man wiped his eyes with a trembling hand. Lenny nodded as if that was all he had to say. Then, just like that, he sat back down. Ray appeared without a word and gently placed a plate in front of him. Pear pie, warm, extra slice, no charge. Lenny didn't look at the cameras, didn't acknowledge the phones hovering low. He picked up his fork and took a bite, slow and steady, like nothing had happened. Because to him, it hadn't. This wasn't about a performance. It was about being heard, just once. And now that he'd said his piece, he wanted his breakfast. The rest of the diner didn't clap, didn't cheer, they didn't need to. Sometimes the loudest truth is the one spoken softest, and followed by the sound of a man eating pie in peace. Life didn't go back to normal, not really. Because after a moment like that, after a man like Leonard Briggs stands up and tells a room full of people the truth they never thought to ask, something in the air stays different. It doesn't shout, it settles. A week after the pie, a van from the Veterans Assistance Foundation pulled up outside Maple Junction. 2 men in navy coats walked in, asked for Mr. Briggs, and handed him a folder. Inside was a key, a signed lease, and a simple note. You've earned a place to rest. The apartment wasn't big. 1 bedroom, clean carpet, a coffee pot that worked, a little porch where Lenny could sit and watch the light fade without being asked to move along. But even with a roof over his head, he never stopped coming back. Every Thursday morning at 7:45, like clockwork, Lenny would walk through the door of Maple Junction wearing that same marine jacket. The booth by the window was unofficially, permanently his. He always ordered the same thing. Ray didn't even bother asking. But now something new had taken root. Something unexpected. People began showing up, not reporters anymore, not protesters, young people, recruits, cadets. At first it was 1 or 2, kids from the community college or new hires from the Pinefield Police Department. They came in with notepads, unsure of what to say, until Lenny motioned for them to sit, and he talked. Not about war, not about glory, not even about injustice. He talked about courage, about the kind that doesn't come with medals, about waiting in line when no one wants you there, about holding your ground not with anger, but with patience, about loneliness, the kind that sets in when the world moves past you like you never existed. Most people who yell aren't dangerous, he'd say. It's the quiet ones you need to understand, because they've already seen more than they ever asked for. Word spread. Soon local precincts started sending rookies in groups to sit with him once a month, not to interrogate, to listen, to learn, and they did. Back at the diner, something else changed too. Harold, the owner, decided it was time for an update. Not to the food, not to the prices, but to the wall behind the counter. He cleared the old photos and hung a single black and white picture in the center. It showed Lenny, seated in his usual booth, notebook beside his coffee, eyes cast out the window. It had been taken just days after the incident. Someone had captured it without him noticing. There was nothing posed or dramatic about it, just stillness, presence. Below the frame was a small brass plaque. It read, "Some fights are won with silence." People would stop and stare at it while they waited for coffee. Some would take pictures. Others would simply place a hand on the wall beneath it. A quiet acknowledgement of a man who'd never asked for attention, but had commanded it anyway. Lenny never commented on the photo, but the first time he saw it, he paused. Then slowly, he smiled. A real one. The kind that reaches the eyes. Because in a town that once looked past him, now he was part of the walls. In a world that moves too fast and forgets too easily, the story of Leonard Briggs reminds us of something essential. Dignity is not earned through recognition. It's owed through humanity. Lenny didn't ask to go viral. He didn't seek attention, sympathy, or applause. All he wanted was a seat at a table, a warm meal, and the basic respect every person deserves, especially those who've carried burdens most of us will never understand. Too often our society forgets the quiet ones, the veterans who come home to silence, the homeless man we pass on the sidewalk, the woman behind the counter who remembers your name even when the world doesn't. But every person has a story, and some of the deepest strength is carried in silence. Lenny's story teaches us that sometimes the most powerful stand is made by sitting down and refusing to be erased. It reminds us to look twice, not with suspicion, but with compassion. And it urges us to listen not just to the loudest voices, but to the ones who've learned to endure without making noise. For those of us who've lived long enough to remember the way things used to be, this story isn't just inspiring. It's a call to return to something true: respect, patience, and the courage to see the people behind the pain. So the next time you sit down in a quiet diner or pass someone who looks forgotten, remember Lenny Briggs. Maybe offer a kind word. Maybe offer your seat. Maybe, just maybe, offer your ear. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of someone you once knew, we invite you to help us keep these stories alive. Please like this video, leave a comment below to share your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that speak to the soul. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story that might just change the way you see the world. Because sometimes, the smallest stories carry the biggest truths.